Hi, it's Michael David, and we are digging deep into the Sumerian clay tablets today. Are they fiction? Are they true? A mixture of both? I'll try my best to help you, but you have to find your own way with this material. But I believe a lot of it is our actual history. Um, in the early tablets, they talk about Niburu, and that was a faraway planet that comes around the sun every 3,600 years, and that equals a one shar, SHAR. So, how does it stay warm when it's way out there? Apparently, there were a lot of volcanoes on the surface and lava within that warmed the planet all the time. But they had problems with a lot of fighting amongst the Annunaki, and there was apparently nuclear wars, which they refer to as an evil wind, and destroyed a lot of their atmosphere on their planet. And they needed something to shield the atmosphere, which they determined to be gold. So they knew there were other planets toward the sun, like what they called it the seventh planet from them, which was Earth. And so they wanted to go there and explore this as kind of a mining colony to purely get gold. Um, they had a lot of royal bloodline arguments and fights over who was actually in charge. And ANU had the royal bloodline, but there was another warrior named Alulu who took over. And he was the original ancient astronaut. He wanted to come to Earth and explore, and so for a while he was the top dog, as you could say. Um, Now I remember I grew up in the California public school system. They had 9 planets in my textbook, and they said at the very beyond, way out there, is Planet X. That's the way I was taught. There was one more planet, and Pluto was counted at that point, and then the last one was Planet X, and it was way out there, but it circled around the Earth every now and then. So that's pretty interesting. And sometimes people might wonder, why is a circle divided into 360 degrees? It could be anything, right? But that would be based on the 3,600 year rotation of Niburu. Um, so his chariot or spacecraft had to get through the Hammered Bracelet, which was this asteroid belt, which is incredible. And you can look on charts of the solar system. It's between Mars and Jupiter, and it's millions and millions of asteroids in a circle, in a rotation. And they believed there was a giant planet bigger than Earth called Tiamat that blew up or was destroyed or something, and half of it's the asteroid belt and half is now Earth. So he was able to get through it and touch down in the waters of, I believe it must have been the Persian Gulf, right below Iraq. And he describes he came out in like a spacesuit, which looked like a fish's outfit. And the earliest beliefs in gods are like a fish god that came from the sea. The earliest beliefs in the Middle East, there's these ancient fish gods, and I believe that's based on Alulu coming out in this suit, and he thought he was going to need oxygen, but lo and behold, there was oxygen on this Earth. He was able to take it off and breathe on this planet. So the next task was to find the gold, immediately. And there were all these marshes everywhere. It was really marshy. And there is a section of southern Iraq that is a field of marshes. It's very large, and I believe that's where they were looking. A lot of geography ties in with this, so I'm not just rambling here. And that was that fertile crescent of the two rivers that were very far apart, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and they came together right before Iraq hits the sea, the Persian Gulf. So I believe that's Eden, Edin is what they called it. And that was that lush area that they were first developing. The marshes were very difficult to work with. They had advanced knowledge in building dams and dikes and diverting the water and creating some dry areas where they could have some agriculture and some mining. They needed houses right off the bat, so they used brick. They were able to make bricks, and they had all the reeds from the marshes, which they created the roofs for shelter. So apparently that's what they first looked like. And they had a type of a vacuum that they were able to vacuum through this water, and it was able to sluice out and separate the gold. But what they mostly found in this area was iron and copper and just a little bit of gold. So apparently they worked for 6 days, and then on the seventh day they rested. And the idea is that was later translated into the Old Testament and the Bible of the 6 days of working and the seventh day of rest. So, like I said, lots of exploring of the earth around this time. And they did find a small amount of gold. And when Niburu came around, Anu was saying, hey, you're under pressure. We're coming around. I need you to bring that gold up. So they were able to get a small amount. There was great rejoicing, and it did help them a little bit. But they had to come back down to earth and really start mining the planet. And that's when Enlil came down. He actually had royal blood from Anu. Whereas Enki, this is where Enki comes into the story, and they called him Ea, E-A as in earth, E-A-R-T-H. And he was more of a working with his hands, an explorer. He really wanted, he was like a scientist and really wanted, almost like a biologist, to study and enjoy the earth. Whereas Enlil was purely about the mining and the gold. And Enlil went to the east area around Lebanon, which is just above Israel, because he wanted a base for the rocket ships to land. He needed this giant base of operations to put the gold on and launch it back up to Niburu every time they came around. So there is an ancient site in Baalbek, this very, very old city, where there's this platform, and the giant stones are cut out into these squares of 1,000 tons. It's mind-blowing. It's incredible. It's something that, how could they do it back in ancient times unless they had advanced machinery? And they're cut with precision, these blocks. So Baalbek, B-A-L-B-E-K, is very important to study and research. It's one of the cornerstones of the ancient astronaut theory. And I believe it's leftover evidence that gives credence to this story. And the other place of importance is the cedar forests. Believe it or not, there's a forest of cedar trees in the mountains in Lebanon in the Middle East. You would think it would all be fairly desert-like a California desert, but there is this cedar forest. And as a matter of fact, the flag of Lebanon, if you look at it, is a cedar tree. So Anu wanted this area to also be a base of operations. To this day, it's called Forest of God. And he wanted to be higher up, I believe, and to launch off these rockets as well. So that's a very ancient and important site. And they mention that in the tablets, the cedar forests of this area. So that's why I do believe it's Baalbek near Lebanon. So Enki was sent off to the faraway lands to find more gold because there just wasn't enough. And he went to the Abzu, and by all my research, and I'm leaning heavily on Michael Tellinger here, please read his books. and he's from South Africa, is that it was in this lower area of Zimbabwe and South Africa where the Abzu was, where they were doing ancient gold mining thousands and thousands of years ago. And there certainly are ancient gold mines all throughout South Africa. And once again, he has a beautiful coffee table picture book showing all of these ancient sites. And what else could they be for? Why on earth would hunter-gatherer man need mining operations that went way deep into the earth? It makes no sense in our history unless it was another group coming down to mine, bring the materials to the Middle East, to this Baalbek, launch it back up. So that's, now how many were there? There was about 600 workers on Earth. They actually give the amount. And 300 workers in Lamu, which is Mars. And there are pyramids on Mars. You can look at them on pictures online. There's a whole series of pyramids, and they appear to be around a dry ocean bed in that area, and that's where the face on Mars is as well. It might have been a marker or something. So there's certain things that fit together and make this story, which seems like a wild fictional tale, to actually be true. We know there were, and remember, there's only 600, but they were giants. They were able to do incredible amount, much more than humans could do. And they were looking around. They were finding animals on the earth. They were finding mankind, but mankind was more of a primitive to them and wasn't yet consigned to be part of this story. I'm telling you about the basics with the Annunaki. They were trying to do everything themselves at first. So that's a lot. I've given you a lot to dig in with this ancient story of the first astronauts upon the Earth, if it's true. And they didn't like the Earth because mainly it was too hot. It was too close to the sun for them, which kind of indicates why the Anunnaki are always in the distance. They're always hidden away. Even in the ziggurats of the pyramids, there's these walls where they're behind the walls. They're rarely out and about and interacting with humans later on. They tend to not like, the direct sunlight of the earth, and it would explain why they don't really want to be here. It's an ancient colony. It's a colony to them. They want to go back. And I'll leave you with Genesis 6 of the Bible does say that there was a group of beings who came down from the heavens, landed upon the earth. They mated with humans, and they created this race of giants, which we're going to get to a little bit later. But there is a lost race of giants, which is spoken of very little in the Old Testament, but yet there it is. So I'll leave you with that. You've got the basics of their royal family, their structure. And Olulu, they were very angry with that first astronaut. And they ended up killing him, and he was buried on Mars. That's what happened to Olulu. But his son was Ea, or Enlil. And Enlil is a very important key player from this point onward on the Earth. And he's the real hero of the story. The scientist, the engineer, the astronaut, and eventually the champion of human beings, which we'll get into. So definitely, I'm going on the interpretations of Zecharia Sitchin. He has passed away, but I did meet him. I went to lectures with Zecharia. He was an older man, but I was able to see him. I got to know his web designer and his cameraman. I've talked to his cameraman, and he definitely, had strong feelings that this was a true story, a true biography, and he wanted to interpret it to the best of his knowledge. So I got, as close as I could at the time. I was a young student, and he was older, and he died a little bit after that. But it was exciting to get to see him lecture in person. So I'll leave you with that. Check out my videos at Mystery Island's Treasure Chest and dig into the writings of Sitchin. And there are others. We're going to cover others, but Sitchin is a good base. And dig into the Sumerian clay tablets, which are found, there's thousands of them. They're at the British Museum, University of Pennsylvania. They're and obviously in Iraq and these ancient museums all over the world. And I'll leave you with that. I'm Michael David. Take care.